Hey guys, it's Rift here. How are you all doing today? I'm actually kind of surprised that I've not made any videos on Insomniac Venom, or the symbiotes for that matter. I've made a video on Peter, and I've made a video on Anti-Venom, but I haven't actually discussed the main villain yet. So with that being said, let's respond to that guy's Arcworth's video on Venom, and see if I have anything to add to the topic. Let's get started.
Today I want to talk about a spooky character, Venom. What makes him scary? Well, whenever he shows up in a video game, the game ends up sucking more balls than your mom at a bubble tea house. Specifically, today I want to focus on his appearance in Spider-Man 2, and analyze what went wrong and what we can learn from that game's mistakes.
I think that there were a lot of contributing factors that led to Venom being underwhelming in Spider-Man 2, and it has nothing to do with, Eddie Brock wasn't Venom. No, I think that's stupid to me. I think that it is possible to write a good Venom using Harry Osborn, it's just that they didn't really do it. And as I said, it's not because of one specific thing, but rather a build-up of contributing factors. From his limited screen time to the fact that he doesn't get enough development, I think it really hurts the symbiote. Not to mention the symbiote's goals are inconsistent, which leads to a much more bland and forgettable villain.
Now, I know this is my second video in a row that is negative about Spider-Man 2, so before we get ahead of ourselves, let me remind you that I love this game, and just because it has flaws doesn't make it unlovable.
I 100% agree with that sentiment, but honestly, dude, don't feel bad about it. You making videos about it and other people making videos about it is helping inspire me to return to talking about this game, so honestly, don't feel bad. And in retrospect, I'm sure that's a take that we all share about the game. Whether you love or hate the game, I feel like we're all coming to appreciate the game's flaws, even if we still like it. Some people may hate the game, and that's perfectly fine. I personally like the gameplay still, and I really like the web swinging, even if I have issues with the story.
I think there are three major flaws in Venom that I want to deconstruct, which are screen time, characterization, and presence. But before we begin, I want to point out some things I think aren't issues. For example, maybe this is a hot take, but the presence of Eddie Brock doesn't matter to me. I like the character, but I'm not against different characters like Harry taking up the mantle.
I would agree with this to an extent. I think based on the adaptation, I don't have an issue with Peter Parker, Flash Thompson, Harry Osborn, or Eddie Brock wearing the symbiote. But again, you've got to do it very well. You've got to pick one character and focus on that character. I think what screwed over the live-action Venom movies was how inconsequential Eddie Brock actually was to the Venom symbiote. Even though it's implied that Venom chose him and they were compatible, pretty much everyone in those movies are compatible with the Venom symbiote. From Annie to the fucking cat or dog to even Mrs. Chen. It comes across as ridiculous.
Especially because it's not Eddie that makes Venom what he is as a villain. It's the powers of the symbiote combined with the hatred of Spider-Man.
A slight tweak there, I would argue that it's the shared hatred of Peter Parker and Spider-Man that the host and the symbiote have. It's a bit of a nitpick on my behalf, and I know what you meant, but I just think it's an important distinction to make, because if one has hatred towards Spider-Man and the other doesn't, I don't think it works. Kinda like Spider-Man 2's Venom.
I'll touch on this more when we get to the characterization segment, but for now, while I would have liked to have seen Eddie, I don't think Harry is an inherently wrong move. Another thing that doesn't bother me is the resistance to fire. I know it's one of the symbiote's main weaknesses, but it just doesn't bother me, especially when Brian Intahar's reasoning is just that making Venom walk through fire looks cool.
I would agree with this completely. Like, I'll be honest, I'm not a huge comic book guy, so forgive me for being ignorant in the comment section, but most of the time, the Venom weakness that is most iconic and well known is the one to sound waves. You know, that's usually the one that Peter exploits when he removes the black suit, and it's shown to be very effective against the symbiote in basically all of the mainstream media, especially the modern movies and shows. It's not very comic accurate, I'll give him that, especially since fans of Spider-Man 3 will be a little confused that Venom can suddenly shrug off explosives and fire like it's nothing. But hey, it is what it is. As long as they kept the weakness to sound waves, I don't have an issue with it personally. And at the end of the day, Anti-Venom is in the game, so they basically just traded one of his iconic weaknesses for a lesser known one.
Generally, if it serves the interpretation of the character well, then I don't mind bending the rules a little bit. And we'll see that Venom was a weak point for mostly writing issues, and not for anything that surface level.
Once again, I completely agree with this. I don't see an issue from diverting away from the source material as long as what you write is better. I mean, take a look at Mr. Freeze in the Batman animated series. He wasn't very comic accurate, but he was better. He was more sympathetic, and that helped inspire future adaptations of Mr. Freeze, such as in the Arkham games. Take Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man as another example. Yeah, organic webs, he doesn't have web shooters, we've heard it all before. But at the end of the day, he was well written. Well, in his first two films, he was well written anyways, and most people have a lot of love for his character. So people can look past the changes as long as you make good writing decisions.
Okay, with those two big caveats out of the way, let's look at the screen time of Venom. It's not just the amount of screen time, but more specifically, how long is spent on each event. Just to clarify, I won't be focusing on the section where we play as Venom because I think that segment is perfect, no critiques, just gas. However, things start to crumble just moments after.
I mean, if we're talking about screen time, why wouldn't you include it? Because at the end of the day, regardless whether it's good or bad, it's still screen time, is it not? I feel like you should have included it.
Let's look at how much time is spent in the Venom arc of the game, which is the third act. It lasts about 2.5 hours, or at least it did for me in my 10-hour playthrough. But more specifically, Venom himself is on screen for a shockingly small amount of time. Take a look.
Obviously, this number is pretty vague because it does depend on everyone's playthrough. Whether you die, for example, in the final battle, or whether you have to repeat certain segments of the game, will obviously contribute as to how much screen time Venom has. That being said, a universal complaint of this game is how little screen time Venom had, so it is what it is. Especially since, if we were to take these numbers as gospel, that would mean that Venom is not even in 10% of the actual game. He had a 10-hour runtime, and not even an hour was spent with Venom.
This isn't too much of a problem because most of this act is surrounding Peter, and specifically how the two Spider-Men are going to fight back against Venom, but little of that time is spent interacting with Venom himself.
That's actually a really good point when you think about it. Peter's only interactions with Venom are him getting his ass kicked. The first one at Oscorp, the second one a brief skirmish at his house, the third one when he gets his ass kicked with anti-venom, and then the other time when he goes into the symbiote nest to learn the location of the meteorite. As for Miles, he saves Peter from Venom one time, and he hears Venom in his head during one of the symbiote nests, and that's it.
I believe this is a large problem with his portrayal here. We spend too much time dealing with symbiotes, with the fate of the world, and with Harry, but not Venom. And to see what I mean, we can look at the characterization of Venom. Let me clarify something off the bat, and it's something I mentioned earlier. Venom is a combined hatred towards Peter of the symbiote and the host, and this is why I don't mind the host not being Eddie. But a big problem that Venom has in this game is that he doesn't really hate Peter.
I mean, there are moments where it is shown that he is angry towards Peter, but again, I don't think that qualifies as hatred necessarily. He's angry at Peter for leaving with the black suit, he's angry at the notion of being forgotten by his father, and obviously he's angry at Peter for wanting to destroy the black suit when, from Harry's perspective, that's the only thing keeping him alive. Whilst Harry has moments of anger throughout the game, ironically enough, I think it's the symbiote that's the problem. Venom clearly has anger in the story, however, it's not directed towards Peter, but instead it's directed towards Miles and Craven, since Venom believes that those two are responsible for why Venom was separated from Peter in the first place. In fact, throughout most of Act 3, Venom seemingly doesn't want to hurt Peter at all, because Venom wants to convince Peter to join his side, only for it to then be revealed at the very end, right before Venom's death, that he actually hates Peter and will just kill him anyways, where it's then revealed that Harry had no agency for any of his actions and he was simply being controlled by Venom. What makes great symbiote stories like Spectacular Spider-Man work is the shared hatred for Peter Parker and Spider-Man between the host and the symbiote, but that's not what we get in Spider-Man 2.
Now, granted, certain portrayals of Venom have leaned into Venom also not necessarily wanting to flat out kill Peter, but to make him suffer first. However, that's not what we get here. So much of Harry and Peter's dialogue is Harry saying, "Look how much fun we were having over here. Wouldn't it be awesome if we could be two goopy best friends?" There's this build up to the line where Harry says, "We are Venom." But the problem I have with this is, well, what are you Venom to? What are you poisoning?
That's actually a really good point as well. Like, what is his name even come from? The fact that he heard Kraven say Venom that one time? The whole reason for Venom's name is the idea that both Host and Symbiote are poison to Peter Parker and Spider-Man. But again, we don't get that in this game. Funnily enough, not so long ago, I actually had a pretty interesting idea on how to rewrite Venom in this game so that the name Venom makes sense without it necessarily being targeted towards Peter and Spider-Man. Remember, within the context of this universe, the symbiote has already experienced its fair share of evil, being experimented on by Oscorp, watching Kraven kill Peter, watching Kraven hunt down Dr. Connors, aka the Lizard, who, aside from his condition, is an innocent man. Not to mention, he has insistence on the whole wanting to heal the world thing. So instead of being poisoned to Peter Parker, what if Venom was poisoned to the very concept of evil? Venom has already witnessed his fair share of villainy and evil, and as a result it would have been quite an interesting concept if Venom would instead go on a killing spree, healing the world from the concept of evil, which actually would make sense given Venom's whole anti-hero thing in the comics as well as other media like the animated series. It could even challenge Peter and Miles's no-kill rule, and it could even develop all three characters, making them grow off of one another. You could even potentially get a redemption for Venom later on in the game. Something like that would have been way better than the one-note villain that Venom would eventually become. Personally, I think that would have made the story better. Not sure how they would have incorporated it with the whole symbiote invasion thing. They would have had to change quite a few things, but I think it would have been better. Let me know what you guys think down below.
Sure, maybe this is a problem that was created by something like the Venom movies and simply perpetuated here, but at least in those movies, Venom is looked at as an anti-hero, and this game poses him, or more accurately, the symbiote, as a villain. I believe this is the crux of where the issue lies. The main antagonist of the game is an alien that comes to New York and possesses whatever body it needs to colonize Earth. Venom, as in the Spider-Man villain, is present in name and design only.
That's a great point as well, and it creates another issue within the story. That being, why is Venom so insistent on bonding with Peter Parker? Like, in other adaptations it makes sense, because Peter is either the first person that the symbiote comes into contact with, or Peter is one of the only superhuman characters within the verse, but within the context of Spider-Man 2, there are so many other characters it could bond with that would make more sense to its endgame goal. Like, he was already at Oscorp when forced to bond with Harry Osborn. Wouldn't bonding with Norman Osborn or Dr. Connors or another one of the scientists who have higher up clearance make more sense? They would probably have access to the meteorite. And if you want to make the argument of, well, the symbiote wants to bond to a more powerful host, well, it has quite a lot of options within the game. Why not bond to Tombstone, someone who has had questionable morals in the past and has unbreakable skin? Why not bond to Kraven, the guy who literally killed Peter Parker? Why not bond to Miles Morales? He's got all of Peter's abilities plus lightning powers. Why not bond to the Lizard, a massive out-of-control monster with one hell of a healing factor? Fairly certain it would be pretty easy for Venom to control the Lizard. It feels as though it only bonds with Peter just to appease fan service and to tick boxes, especially since the symbiote doesn't give two fucks about Peter, since by the end of the game he's willing to kill Peter anyways, along with everyone else. That boy Aqua is completely right here. The symbiote doesn't have a connection to any character in this game. They are all just bodies for it to inhabit so it can carry out its ultimate goal, which makes it a more boring character.
This leads to larger issues I have with the plot overall, and that is that I don't think Venom had enough room to be in this game.
Kraven should have become Venom. Like, I'm gonna be completely honest, I think that Kraven would have been a very fascinating host for Venom in this game. And it would be quite fascinating to see what Kraven would do when bonded to the symbiote, since all of his actions within the game are under the justification that he's on borrowed time. But what if that was no longer the case? What if the symbiote cured his disease? What would he do then? Would he even give two fucks about the Spider-Men? Or would he relish the opportunity at still being the ultimate hunter?
Now, don't get me wrong, I know the third act was changed a lot, but it's just something we have seen so many games that try to cram a Venom story alongside a symbiote story struggle with. And this misstep stems from people who conflate the two. Black Suit Spider-Man and the trials that go along with that storyline are separate from Venom's storyline. Yes, they are consecutive storylines, but they are not the same. I think Spider-Man 2 should have been strictly about the black suit, and the third game about Venom. Obviously, this is a difficult thing to pull off, and I imagine Insomniac would never get the go-ahead from Sony, because if we were to have both in one game, then we can make even more cash and bank on even more hype moments.
I see where he's coming from, and I do agree that that would be the ideal outcome, but I think with a video game, it's just not feasible to ask. Like, yeah, spending an entire game with the black suit and then teasing Venom right at the end would obviously be awesome on paper at least, but there's two issues with it. Number one, you have no guarantee of the sequel living up to the expectations laid out in this game. You could obviously go through a situation that Insomniac went through where they got hacked and they had to cancel certain projects, which could potentially leave the symbiote storyline on a cliffhanger, which would be very disappointing. However, the bigger issue is the development time of the games. Spider-Man PS4 came out in 2018, Spider-Man 2 came out 5 years later. I really don't think the fans would wait another 5 years just to see Venom. Fans were already impatient to see Carnage, and he was planned to be in the DLC for Spider-Man 2, which ultimately got cancelled. I really don't think it's reasonable to ask the fans to wait several years just to see part 2 of a symbiote storyline. Like, imagine if you saw Infinity War and then you had to wait 5 years to see Endgame. It's just not reasonable. I think a video game, especially in the modern day, just wouldn't translate the symbiote story very well because of the time it takes to develop them.
We spend under 2 hours in this 10-hour game in the symbiote suit. I'm not saying the game needs to be longer though, because that's unrealistic. People on the internet want the game to be twice the length, and I think for a game like this, that just isn't realistic. Especially when most superhero games are short. Arkham Asylum is 4 hours, City took me 5, and yet those games are loved.
I completely agree. I don't think the issue with the game is that it's too short, I just think that nothing was overly developed. I would rather see 1 or 2 things done beautifully rather than 10 things that are underwhelming. Now for me at least, I'm going to give you 2 examples of games that completely fit what he is saying. Might be weird examples, but stay with me here. Dragon Quest VIII and Dragon Quest XI are 2 of my favourite games of all time. However, if you asked me to go back and replay one of them, it would always be 8. Why? Because the game is around the same quality level, but it takes significantly less time to complete. Since Dragon Quest VIII on average will take you between 60 to 100 hours in order to 100% everything, whereas Dragon Quest XI will take you easily between 100 and 140 hours to 100% it. I mean, fuck, one of my favorite superhero games of this year is Dispatch. That game is around 8 to 10 hours long, but it's perfect from start to finish in my opinion, and as a result, I would play that 10 times rather than touching Spider-Man 2's story ever again. This is obviously a case-by-case basis, everyone likes different things and that's totally fine, but for me at least, I would rather have a shorter game that is fun from start to finish rather than a longer game that loses me halfway through.
My point here is the length itself isn't necessarily the issue, but it's the presence. This leads me to the third major issue with Venom in this game, and it's the presence. This is a problem with a lot of the game. Many villains, ideas, and themes come and go so quickly that we don't get time to marinate on it. To look at what I mean, let's take a look at a different video game interpretation of Venom that has many similar issues. Spider-Man Web of Shadows. This game features a Venom storyline and Black Suit storyline in one, but goes on the assumption that the player is familiar with both. People always talk about this portrayal of Venom because, admittedly, the game gets balls to the wall with it, especially when it comes to the boss fights, but Venom is hardly in the game. He shows up in the beginning, briefly in the middle act, and is then gone until the end game. And the reason this is mostly okay is because Venom's presence is felt across the game. He's the inciting incident, he turns the city on its head, and he is the catalyst for all of the fun in the game. This is why I downplayed the significance of Venom's actual screen time, because in the end, it doesn't really matter so long as he has presence over the game, but he doesn't.
Another reason why Kraven would have been a better choice to be Venom. His presence is felt throughout most of the game, even when he's not in New York, because even the Sandman battle, the introduction to the game, is directly inspired from Marco's fear of Kraven.
I think the series would be far better off if the game were left with Spider-Man 2 having strictly the black suit, Meanwhile, Venom gets a whole game to himself, and his villainy is able to flourish, because here, he only acts as a physical force.
Again, on paper at least, this would be the ideal outcome, but for the reasons I outlined earlier, this just wouldn't work with a video game.
What Venom is also capable of is the mental warfare. He nullifies Peter's spider sense, meaning he never knows when he's in danger, and because the symbiote is connected to a hive mind, he knows all of Peter's secrets. Once Harry gains the symbiote, he doesn't utilize any information against Peter aside from scream. Hell, here's an idea. Since the symbiote is connected to a hive mind and Peter, due to anti-venom, still has some of that symbiote within him, we could have Venom speak to us throughout the story, commenting on our progress, taunting us, and making him feel like he is in our heads. Even then, however, the sheer lack of time we spend in the third act is what hinders Venom the most.
To be fair, that's not a bad idea. I mean, it would be very similar to Arkham Knight, the idea that Batman is off his tits for most of the game and he's hallucinating Joker, but I think it would have been pretty interesting to have Venom talk to you whilst you're bonded to the symbiote. That's something that should have happened more when Peter was bonded to the black suit, and having it happen when Peter is also bonded to anti-venom could be pretty cool, especially since when Peter breaks free of the black suit, there's still a small piece of the symbiote still within his body, so it would make sense for this to happen.
Okay, so we got a bad Venom interpretation. So what? Why do people care so much? Well, the biggest reason is that we won't be getting another one. Typically speaking, you can't do a Venom storyline twice, and certainly not a black suit storyline. If we get a bad Spider-Man game, then honestly, that's not that big of a deal. When the Amazing Spider-Man 2 game came out and sucked balls, I didn't care because it's not like we're never gonna get a Spider-Man game again. But considering that something like a symbiote Spider-Man game is something you can only do once per universe, mostly, and because games take so long to develop, then it's not unreasonable to think that the next time we get a proper black suit Spider-Man game could very well be a decade or more away.
That's a perfectly valid criticism, yeah, like if you're not satisfied with one Spider-Man story, it's not the end of the world because you're gonna get another Spider-Man story in the future. A symbiote storyline, on the other hand, is completely different. I mean, the last time we got a decent one was Web of Shadows, and then we had to wait 15 years to get Spider-Man 2. We could very well be waiting another decade for another symbiote story. He is completely right with that.
I think this is why the fan backlash to how Venom was handled in this game was so loud, because this was, in many ways, our only chance. Sure, there might be a Venom game on the way, as rumors have it, but even then, I imagine that game would focus far more on a lethal protector angle, i.e. an anti-hero angle.
And there's nothing wrong with that at all. Fuck, if you'd have tweaked certain aspects of the story, I think it would have worked for Spider-Man 2. Having a lethal protector, but he just leans too far into the merciless bloodbath route that it blurs the line between protector and destroyer.
Venom in this game has been changed to be more of a demon, simply possessing Harry like it began to with Peter, and while some people dream up defenses of this, stating that Peter introduced the idea of rage to the symbiote, he didn't exactly introduce the idea to dominate the world, and when it comes to the story, if we need to pull from sources or theories outside of the actual game, then we have a bit of a problem on our hands.
I would agree with that, especially since I don't believe for 1 second Peter introduced rage to the concept of a tortured character that was held captive at Oscorp for several years. Fairly certain it learned anger, rage, resentment, fear, all of this shit long before it even met Peter.
I also think that part of the reason this happens is that Insomniac was pulling from too many different sources of inspiration. Hear me out, but something I loved from all the Insomniac games is that they draw clever inspiration from some of the best Spider-Man media. We continually see Peter doing things that reference the movies or certain comics, and that love for the character is what drives some of the best moments. Especially when it results in Insomniac using those inspirations as a jumping off point to do something completely different. With Venom, I get that same impression that the writers are pulling inspiration from all over. The symbiote takeover feels like a massive homage to Web of Shadows. The way Harry and the symbiote call themselves Venom in unison brings to mind the classic interpretation of the character. The way the symbiote acts like a demon, possessing its host, reminds me a lot of the original Ultimate Spider-Man run, something the games even reference further when showcasing Peter's younger hairdo. The problem the game runs into with this approach is that these inspirations are coming from completely different angles and interpretations of the character, meaning the end product is an abstract art piece that looks cool but lacks cohesion aside from the unifying long tongue and distorted spider across the chest.
That is the perfect way of summing it up, and you know what? He's completely right. I mean, even if we take a look at all the people that the symbiote bonds to, we get Agent Venom, Black Suit Peter, and Venom all in the same game. Technically the same 2/3, since I'm fairly certain you meet Harry with the symbiote at around the 3rd way mark of the runtime. Not only did Insomniac try taking from too many symbiote stories, but you also have to balance that with Kraven, the Hunters, Peter's depression, Miles' character growth. You have to balance so much shit in this game, and it just did not work. I think that the story would have been better if they had ditched the whole symbiote invasion thing and they went with one of two options. Either Kraven becomes Venom, or Venom becomes a lethal protector. Preferably Kraven, if I'm being honest, since he was a very good villain. He was the best character in Spider-Man 2. He has immense presence and aura throughout the first 2 acts of the game. He steals every scene that he's in, and whilst his motivations are shaky at times, he is still the best character in this game, and seeing what he would do when bonded to the Venom symbiote is something that would be quite welcoming, well, for me at least. However, if you're insistent on Harry being the host for the symbiote, make him be a lethal protector, have him be Venom to the very concept of evil, have him go on a killing spree, have him challenge Peter and Miles' no-kill rule. I think that would have been quite interesting. It's not like Peter and Miles haven't wanted to kill people in the past, however their moral compasses prevent them from doing so, and I think exploring that side of their psyches would have been pretty interesting to take. Overall, I would say that Venom in Spider-Man 2 is very frustrating, because he's probably the area of the game that is the easiest to fix. If you were to get rid of the symbiote invasion and develop the bond between Venom and Kraven, or Venom and Harry, I think it would be one of the best symbiote adaptations we've ever seen, but unfortunately, this is not the timeline that we live in. I'm the Gaming Rift, I thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and let me know what you guys think down below. Do you think Venom was well written, or do you think he had issues just like the rest of us? Let us know what you think down in the comments section, and consider joining the Discord server and tuning into live streams where we talk about your favourite fictional characters. Thanks guys, and as always, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care, and goodbye.